like a vampire. Exactly. I'm a vampire. I'm a vampire. I'm a vampire.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They're a vampire? Okay.
Bloopers.
Stay.
Yes, you stay, boobies.
I love my mouth. Okay, I'm done.
Cool. Here we go.
Are we doing the thing?
Yeah. We're doing the thing.
Da, 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 da.
Boop. Plancha.
Plancha.
Welcome to Tits and Tea.
What's up, guys?
Yeah. Episode 3.
2.5.
Which
Technically
is
3.
Yeah. Episode 2, part 2.
Yeah. Episode.
If you will.
I'm Talia.
I'm Chloe.
I really chose a bad moment to do that. Mea culpa.
All good, all good.
We're going to pick up to the best of our ability what we were talking about last week, which was 10 things that we wish that we had learned in SexEd, in junior high, high school, etc. This one will be more brief.
Yeah, we covered a lot of information in that episode, and a lot of it had mostly to do with female reproductive health, and a lot of the misunderstandings around the menstrual cycle, and
menstrual sanitary options.
Yes.
Misunderstandings around them.
We touched lightly on
vasectomies and birth control for men.
We also talked a lot about the different birth control options that are there for women. We didn't go into any brand specifics because that is something that should be discussed with a medical professional if you are choosing that route. Otherwise, in terms of like physical barriers or even tracking methods, as discussed in the last episode, that is something that you determine what is best for you and what's going to work best for you and your partner.
Yeah.
This episode, we're going to get more into sort of what even in, normalizing things, but also what even in sex ed back in grade school was the later part of it after they talked about periods and about hitting puberty and what that meant and all of that.
The hair, where?
Yeah, they inevitably did talk about what the actual reproductive cycle was. And if you were lucky and if you had a really good teacher, you know, they also did talk on the fact that, like, what was normal to some extent. We want to go further into that.
Yes. So,
I mean, I think a good place to start is, one, desire is normal. Having physical hormonal drives and urges is entirely normal.
It is also human, but it's also, I think I know what you're going to say, so I'm just going to let you say it. It's
also entirely acceptable if you don't.
Yeah, if you're ace.
It's a complete range.
Yeah.
Much like, you know,
everything
we
else
talk about so many other things being a spectrum. Human desire and human sexuality is very much a spectrum, and it's not just for los jubilees.
Yeah, and how it manifests differs from person to person.
Yeah.
I think that there's a story that's really pushed by the media everywhere, and it seems like since ancient times that, you know, like men are always supposed to be like super horny all the time and always want it, and girls are just supposed to kind of be like reciprocating and accepting, but heaven forbid you actually trying to like get what you want. That's not good.
And I feel like going into that particular dichotomy could really easily lead us down the road into discussing the whole like whore Madonna dichotomy that
which is expected in women,
but that is a different episode.
Yeah, just kind of wanted to briefly touch on it.
Because it is a part of this for sure. I think certainly in a way that was not the case when we were younger and when older generations were younger.
Well,
hello, Biscuits. I don't know if you can see her in the crop, but
we have both cats.
Both cats are right with us. But in a way that has changed a lot, even since we were younger. in mainstream media, there's a lot more stories out there that are pushing to normalize this in a way that I think is really exciting to see.
There's so much stuff that's coming out now that I wish that I had around when I was growing up.
Like some ones that immediately come to mind are Big Mouth, obviously.
Oh my god!
And then also
Wait,
Pen 15.
I can do that better. Oh my god! I can't do the voice anymore. It's only if I'm drunk, unfortunately. But yeah, Pen 15 was amazing, and
or penis, because it is technically how we wrote penis, as,
to get away with it.
As, in Leet. Oh God, anyone else remember Leet? Way back in the day. Yeah. Might have just aged myself with that one, but it's
fine. She's sucking the youth out of me, so that sounded really sexual.
But
take it how you will.
Thankfully, we have more shows like those.
Yeah.
That are showing and talking, like making a joke of it, but in a way that is normalizing it. It's going like, look, every single one of us knows that every single one of us
did these things
and
had these feelings.
Or had these neuroses or had these like moments of internal conflict because we were like suddenly feeling things that didn't make any sense to us.
No, it's like they're completely confusing alien emotions, and I don't know how many people are actually sitting their kids down in front of these, or like obviously watch the show first. But then, maybe pick and like cherry pick episodes to like start conversations with your kids. I think it's mostly for adults that went through it and kind of looking back. I know for Big Mouth especially, like it is extraordinarily accurate for girls. And I asked a lot of my guy friends, I'm like, is this accurate for you? And they're like, oh, hell yeah. And so it seems like all across the board, 10 out of 10.
And much as those sorts of stories are showing, and much as you and I discovered in our earliest conversations and like bonding as friends, like it is so normal to have some level of interest or curiosity about your body as it's changing, to want to explore these new desires as you're feeling them.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's not just societally, but like religiously, there's a lot of shame that is put on all of us about this stuff. That it's dirty, that
you masturbate, you're gonna get like fur on your hands.
Or I think there was another one that like every time you masturbated, a cat died somewhere.
There was something like that, like a puppy
like
got
just
hit by a car. It's
horrible things that they would tell to essentially children. Because you are
children,
to try and like terrorize us into not.
Well, I mean,
these things.
It makes sense. I mean, it's worked for a millennia, right? This will not be a rant; it will be quick. But most religions, all of them, really, for the most part, if you can think of one organized religion that does not do this, please leave a comment. I love to be proved wrong. I can admit it. But a lot of them have kind of set up this structure of we get you to behave by putting fear in your heart.
Yeah.
And that you cannot... Sorry, I can't focus with biscuits. Biscuits!
It's rude.
Living with cats. It's a journey. But I think a lot of the thing has to do with, they put these fears, like there's a punishment if you do yada, 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 right?
Yeah.
And it keeps you in line for the most part. And I think we're getting to a point as a society, as a species, where we've already kind of gone through the whole questioning process. And I think now we're starting to see on the other side the freedom to be making our own choices for what's right for us, for what feels right to us or within our partnerships, whether it's how you have sex, who you have sex with, who you love.
If you choose not to have sex
at all.
All of those things are much more normalized, or starting to be. We're starting to have more of those conversations, starting to, especially in the various social media platforms that are out there, they're there's a lot of negatives to them, sure, absolutely. But there's also 100% a lot of benefit to them because there's a certain sense of community that's arising.
Yeah.
Especially on platforms like TikTok, really. It's allowed people to start having conversations being like, oh my gosh, I'm finding out I'm not the only one who's felt like this forever. And like, oh, did you guys know?
Yeah.
And like, wow, the epiphany of like, this is not normal for a lot of people, but it is for a subset of people.
Yeah.
And being able to connect those dots and then find individuals who have also gone on that journey of connecting those dots is incredibly empowering. And it's allowing, especially the younger generations, in a way that is, I think, very hopeful, to just get really real about
none of the bullshit,
stuff.
None of the myths about sex, none of the... I'm hoping that as we go forward that there's less, shame being brought. I think for the most part, we're moving in the right direction. As always, change. It's a little bit more of like a pendulum. It's not always just like, ah!
And there's ups and downs in there, and not all of it is accurate information. That is the danger of social media, and also the internet at large. It's essentially the void that all of us have screamed into, and so
damn, Chloe.
Some of it is accurate, some of it is definitely not. Some of it is just our gut feelings or our magical thinking or, old wives' tales and nonsense. But a lot of it is also solid facts and people just being like, I've been told I should feel shame about this, but also it's just not. It's just a human body function.
Yeah.
Why should I be ashamed of how my body was made to actually work?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I know was on the list of things that we were going to hit on as far as things we wish we had learned in sex ed. I know that in school we talked about, I know in my class that we touched on, wet dreams for guys or having, awkward boners. I don't...
Inconvenient boners are a thing.
Yeah, and I don't think that the female equivalent was ever explained.
Yeah, no.
We never talked about, girls, obviously they're not... You're probably not going to ejaculate because...
Yeah, it's not a wet dream in the same sense.
But you're going to wake up and you're going to be wet.
Be ruining a million sheets
but
and
you're going to ruin your panties.
But, yeah.
If you sleep in underwear.
One of the things that I know was really confusing and alarming for me that came out of that, and I'm sure you also experienced this, that's definitely not discussed, is that because of the acidic pH, when you're healthy...
Oh, dude, I know what you're going to say, and I was not prepared.
Because female anatomy and our vaginal cavity and all of that area should have a slightly acidic pH, we bleach our underwear with our natural discharge.
I thought there was something so wrong with me.
Yeah.
I was freaked out. And also the fact that, your discharge changes depending on what part of your cycle you're in. And, the amount of times
not having any idea what any of that means because it wasn't talked about in detail like that for us.
And it's one of those things where it's I know it's probably awkward for a lot of parents to be viewing their children as starting to become little adults in training, essentially.
Yeah.
And having to have those kinds of conversations.
For much of human history, we were considered adults, though, because we could have babies, and it's really just in recent centuries that started really shifting.
Since the 1950s.
I mean, in particular,
but I'm not going to go into a huge history rant about teen culture right now because we haven't the time.
That is its own subject.
And I think obviously it's yes, in history, people, I mean, throughout history, though, like, yes, teenagers were treated like young adults. As soon as you were able to procreate, you were assumed to be
of marriageable
age. You had to deal with adult problems. But to think, we have definitely gotten better as the human race of being more open with our kids about the realities of sex as time has gone on. Because, like, the whole thing in, like, Bridgerton, where he's starting to talk about, or, like, oh my God, Simon, I forgot his name, beautiful man. Anyways, Simon's talking about masturbation, and he's like, oh, you know, it continues at night when you touch yourself, and she's just, like, so, like, what?
Yeah.
Just doe in a headlights. I mean, that really did happen. Women were not told anything. Men were told everything. Men would be taken, especially like royalty or upper class. As soon as you got your first wet dream, your dad would sometimes take you to a lady of the night to make sure that you were really a man. Whereas a woman would maybe get a couple of words right before it happened. And sometimes there were people in the room to make sure that you did it. And sometimes they would put a sheet out underneath you to make sure that you bled. And if you're bleeding the first time that you're having sex, you are doing it wrong.
Wrong. That is definitely something.
And we're going to go more into that in a different episode, but I did want to touch on that because it's fucked up and it's still very prevalent.
Yeah, that's
in a
definitely
lot of
around
cultures.
a lot of the... That has much more to do with, like, the different myths about virginity.
Yeah.
Virginity being a myth in and of itself.
Well, I
or
remember,
a social construct.
Yeah, because, like, I know when I was younger, like, I did masturbate. I explored my body, and I was really scared that when I had sex with someone the first time, that, like, I wasn't going to bleed. And that they were going to think that, like, I wasn't a virgin, or that I was a liar, or that I was, like, loose. Like, I don't know, but it was just, like, it was so embedded in me. And a lot of that came from
society
also, like, society and culture, and also the fact that I'm obsessed with historical fiction. So just, like, all of that as well. Like, I'm like, oh my God.
Like, we're talking about it like it's history, but also like it's personal, because it is.
Yeah. But I think that, you know, all that just to say that I think as far as the scheme of time goes, we have come a long way. And we are moving in a good direction. And I all of my friends out there that, like, are having kids, they're so loving and open. And, like, I just know that there's just, like, these little babies, these little beautiful little cheeky monkey babies that are just, God, my ovaries. Anyway, they are just going to be raised so right.
Yeah.
And they're going to be allowed to love who they want. And they're going to be able to talk about masturbation. And, like, yes, you may not want to go and talk to your parents, but, like, you might have, like, a cool auntie. Or, you know, an older sibling or a friend or someone you can go to. And it won't be as taboo. I hope.
I think even if it's not something that you ever want to get into, like, great detail with your child about, normalizing it can go such a long way.
Yeah.
Like,
you don't have to give them, like, a play-by-play, like, this is how you...
Like, my parents never sat me down and had, like, some in-depth conversation with me about it, and, like, we definitely did the whole thing as I was growing up and started watching slightly more grown-up movies with them. If there were, like, more intimate scenes, they would do the whole, like, cover your eyes thing. As I got closer to, like, the appropriate age to watch it. So, like, I would still hear things, but, like, I wasn't able to, like, watch them yet, which was always hilarious to me, personally.
I don't remember when, because I feel like it shifted from one to the other really quickly, because at one point, it was, I would have to plug my ears, and, like, my mom never did this, that I can remember, but my mom didn't let me watch PG-13 before I was 13, didn't let me watch R until after I had graduated and was out of the house. But my dad would have me plug my ears during a love scene, and he would put a blanket over my head. Yeah. So I couldn't see it, like me and Bella. And I don't remember him ever doing this with Lou, but I'm assuming he just saw all three of us under there and was just like, you will not see this, like, backlit 90s sex scene where you can't even see nipple. I think I was 14 or 15, and I remember I started watching True Blood with my dad and my aunt. And at one point, here I am, 14, 15, barely fully formed, and I'm sitting there on the couch between my dad and my aunt, watching the blood orgy scene in True Blood. If you've seen it, you fucking know. And I'm sitting there just being like, just pretend like you were not aroused. Just pretend like you were anywhere than where you are. And then I remember, like, I was so distracted, I waited until both of them fell asleep. Yeah. And then I actually, like, went back downstairs and rewatched the scene. Yeah. Because I was just like, I want to be able to enjoy it.
So I think part of why I think it's also important to normalize it for ourselves, for our own conversations, and with children, though, is because I do know it wasn't something that was directly discussed, but like my childhood, like elementary school age best friend, she knows who she is. I'm not going to name names, but her mom, may she rest in the absolute glory that she is. But her mom, when we were around, she was dating at the time. She was a single woman, and a divorcee, and she had boyfriends, and she was, like, open about that fact, and they would sometimes spend the night, and, like, she would be flirty with them, and so, like, we got to see a woman who had a healthy sexuality, as an example, and it raised questions for us, but, like, in a, like, what's the big deal kind of way? Like, we were just more like, okay, but why are they always over? Like, we only get sleepovers sometimes. Sleepovers are better! And, like...
And addictive.
Well, and then, like, having started to, like, see adults... Ooh, I think our camera just paused. Okay. So, with them, though, like not just with her, but with others as well, like, we also then started noticing, like, adults seem to love kissing each other on the mouth.
What's the big deal?
And what was the big deal of that?
Gross,
and having the curiosity about that. And so,
yes,
having at least one friend who was equally curious about those things that I could just, like, frankly have these conversations with was, like, tremendously empowering. And then, like, eventually my closest knit circle of friends, like, found the SexEd books in the school library, eventually found our way, because of the internet, because it did exist, did find our way to porn, and, like, started exploring, The one thing that I found particularly freeing, though, because it was the 90s, and I think it was sort of the very, very early days of conversations about sex and human sexuality starting to shift, mostly because of...
Is this like Red Shoe Diary age?
Yeah. I think mostly because of the aftermath of the HIV and the AIDS pandemic. It was normalized to have those conversations among adults.
Yeah.
Because you had to.
Yeah.
For, like, the sake of your own fucking life.
Yeah.
And so, like, I remember, like, on Sex and the City, it was normal to, like, have conversations about, well, have they been tested?
Yeah.
Are they being safe?
Condoms.
Do you have your results? Do you have condoms? Like, those sorts of conversations to actually practice safe sex were much more normalized for a while, and then it sort of faded into the background and is starting to come back. And I think it's important to sort of start bringing that normalcy back.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to talk about as well, just because it's something that I recently ran into, is like, if you're going to be dating multiple people, or, like, if you don't know if you're going to have the opportunity to date other people, but if you're not in a committed monogamous relationship and you're just, like, dating, I think it should be normalized to, like, to talk about, have you been tested? When was the last time that you were tested? And also the fact that, like, you can just ask them to use a condom. Like, you don't need to... I think that there's a lot of pressure on women to, like, let men just, like, go for it, because, like, I know it doesn't feel as good, but at the end of the day, I don't think that a lot of people are it's sad, but a lot of people aren't mature enough or secure enough in themselves to be having really open and honest conversations. And and if you can't be having those, like if I can't go on a date and it would be weird, right? Societally, people think it's weird if I was on a date and this guy wants to come up, and whatever. And if I'm like, okay, well, like, who else are you seeing? Have they been tested? Are you using condoms with them?
Especially early days in a relationship.
Especially early days, and then it's just like, and then it's just like, oh, well, like, I don't know if I'm
that's
like,
gonna just kill the mood.
and honestly,
all of a sudden.
I mean, I'm still fairly young, but I'm just at this point in my life where if you cannot have a conversation with me about it, or if you are being weird or immature about it, I'm going to cut you out.
Yeah, then
because
we are not a match because we are clearly operating with a different set of mores.
Because you may be physically an adult, but obviously emotionally, mentally, there's something that you still need to work on there.
Yeah.
Or if it's something where, like, because I just feel like there's such a culture of, you know, people just, like, running around and doing whatever. And I went through, like, what I call, like, my hoe phase, which was me really just, like, sleeping with 3 different people over, like, I think a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I would switch back. I never was sleeping with, like, I'd sleep with one day and one the other. It'd be like I would hang out with one and, like, screw their brains out until they did something to piss me off. And then I would jump to the next one. And then they would come back and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, and then, you know, I'd just bounce around between the 3 because it's easier to just have those conversations, like, 3 times and just, I didn't want a relationship. I just wanted to get my little rocks off. Mm-hmm. And so why not? Like, just bounce around.
Absolutely.
And it was really amazing to me the amount of people who really hated on that. And I think that there's this, or like if I was, Chloe, my love, that was my fucking drink, get away. And the amount of people who were, you know, like not even just unsupportive, but just kind of being like, well, like, what are you going to do? Like, are you being tested? Like, what if you catch something? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, if I had a dick
and was doing this, it would
we ever have this conversation? The answer is no.
Yeah.
It's very normalized for men to go and sow their wild oats, I think is the term that people usually go with. And it was just so unfathomable to people that, you know, I might just like sex a lot. And it's really kind of mind-boggling to me, or the fact that, like, I had a guy straight up, and, like, this guy's an asshole. I will not name names, but, like, I hope I never see this person again in my life, even though I know I probably will. And he straight up told me that, like, he thought less of me, that my value had lowered in his eyes. And you want to know what? It's really just because he really wanted to fuck me, and I turned him down for 3 years.
Yeah.
So
that's usually at the heart of it.
It's usually at the heart of it, right? And I just wish more people would be, and even, like, women with their women friends, would be more supportive. And really have each other's backs. Because I think, and
like, even if it's not for you.
Yeah.
It is entirely possible. It is entirely possible to not yuck someone else's yum, as long as no one's being hurt or violated, and everyone's consenting and everyone's aware. Like, let folks do what folks are going to do, because ultimately, your personal values, your personal sense of right and wrong, is your choice. You have control over you. And you have control over who you decide to be romantically or physically involved with. But to try and have any say or control over anyone else, especially if no one's being harmed by it, you know, it's not only fruitless, it's an absolute waste of your own energy, because it's not actually going to change anything. It's not going to do any good in the world. It's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. It feels very much akin to the whole thing about, like, holding grudges is like taking poison and hoping it kills the other person. You know, as that old saying goes.
I mean, if you take enough poison in small doses, eventually you build an immunity. Just like the Princess Bride.
Sure. But with that said, I think it's part of the importance of having more normalized conversations around sex and around even like masturbation and things like that has to do with the fact that it allows people to realize earlier in getting to know someone also that they may not be compatible. Because I think that is something that is very much not talked about ever unless you start
compatibility.
Seeking out like advanced like sex education classes.
But how is I'm so sorry. Like that absolutely boggles my fucking mind.
Yeah, really though.
Because it makes you realize like I know everybody keeps talking about how like divorce is on the rise and nobody wants to get married and blah blah blah, but like really for most of human history, like marriage is a contract. It doesn't matter if you're sexually compatible. It's for money, it's for land, it's for whatever. It's a business deal. It's a business deal. It's a transaction. And I think that for most people throughout history, you married someone not knowing if you're sexually compatible with them, and for the most part, like you probably it doesn't matter. You at that point you have sex to create a baby, to make a couple of spares, build up your football team, whatever.
And then you're done. You've done your duty.
Yeah, and I think now that we're really starting to look at sex as this is
part of it
for my not just well-being, but for my pleasure.
Yeah.
The conversation does need to change, and I think it's on its way there.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that people need to start talking about, because it's like I know so many people who are like, yes, okay, so maybe get to know somebody a little bit. But like if you're dating someone, like people are always like, wait till like the third or fourth date, right? Or like wait till you're committed to a relationship. I don't want to get all the way to being in a committed relationship where I have deep feelings for you, only to realize that you are never going to satisfy me sexually. Or if we are into two completely different things.
Yeah.
Or like there's just so much.
You're so disparate in your desires in terms of what you want out of life even.
Yeah.
Let alone what you want in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the hardest truths to swallow as someone who is a natural romantic, who grew up reading the great romances and watching all of these amazing stories and like longing for that sort of fairy tale ending. And I do, and having seen a few real life examples of it, like both sets of my grandparents, lifelong loves. My abuelo died much younger because he got sick, but like my abuela loved him until she passed. And she was 96, I think, when she passed. And she had met him when she was 13.
Wow.
And she still loved him the same.
And that's different.
And like, my Nana and Papa, they loved each other. They were together for 60 years when my Nana passed. And my Papa missed her and loved her the same amount until the day he died. Mm-hmm. And like, even my own parents have been together over 40 years, and you've seen it.
Precious. I hate it. How dare you give me hope?
And
the thing
that I have learned, though, from those even real-life examples is, one, the beginning of this tangent was the thing I've learned, and that's hard for me to say as someone who did grow up with such a romantic heart and mindset, is that as much as we want it to be true, love is not enough.
Oh, God, no. And I think
love does not equal compatibility.
Nope. You can love someone to death and
love
that you're
does
wrong
not
for each other.
Equal healthy relationship dynamics or skills.
Yeah. I think we have something in our culture that is a lot about, and I know we've discussed this before, is like how much you're willing to suffer for a relationship shows like how much you really love that person or like, this is the one, this is your soulmate, when really you're just stuck in trauma patterns with each other. And sometimes you can love somebody, but from afar. I've done that so many times.
Yeah. And
where
I
I still love you, but you're also going to destroy me.
Yeah.
And I
absolutely.
choose myself every time.
And I think there's a lot of that in our culture, or, the opposite extreme of, not actually tea today, but delightful, all the same. There's the almost like polar opposite spectrum of any inconvenience comes up, nope, fuck that, burn it to the ground.
Oh, especially today, day and age, yes.
And
there's a million fish in the sea.
There's a lot of problems and dangers with both of those mindsets.
Don't
I think
go to extremes.
Real success, real compatibility ultimately comes down to even who's willing to do the work with you.
Growing together. I don't know, there's so many different versions of this quote, but you're going to have to fall in, your partner's going to be so many different versions over their lifetime, and you have to make the choice to fall in love intentionally with each of those versions of your partner.
Every single time.
And the moment that you stop is the moment that you're really in trouble.
Absolutely.
And I really wish that they had talked to us more, about relationships in sex ed, because whether it's a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship, a friendship, those are all relationships, and
absolutely
the same skills and lessons apply.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing that really does, in a scientific, medical way, tie all of this back to sex ed, though,
do the thing, Chloe,
is one of the things they don't talk about a lot or at all in most sex ed is the other hormones that are produced in our bodies by physical interaction with other people, by having sex, by snuggling, by being in close proximity with each other, human touch at all.
Yes.
And those are the hormones or chemicals of oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
And oxytocin in particular it's the love drug, is another colloquial term for it. It is that chemical that gets released when you're first falling for someone that makes you feel so bonded and close.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to peak and grow and is present throughout your initial bond, but only for the first 4 or 5 years, because biologically and evolutionarily, that's about how long you needed it to last, so that you could get together, make a baby, and raise that baby to the point that it was most likely going to survive to adulthood, at which point you didn't need to really give a shit about each other anymore, or even stay really involved. And this is going all the way back to before we really had societies. This is early humanity, evolution speaking.
Yeah.
When we were still evolving out of away from Neanderthals, or intermingling with them, because obviously there's that science and the fact that we existed at the same time for a lot longer than we thought we did, but that's its own tangent.
We are the queens of tangents.
But a lot of our human sexuality, a lot of how it works, a lot of how those chemicals work, all of that started evolving with us from the get-go.
Well, it has to. It's the whole point of evolution.
Right. And so it's always been there. Yeah. And it's a big part of why long-term relationships do really take a lot of work, because inevitably those chemicals that your body naturally produces to help you feel bonded and connected to the other get produced less and less over time. Yeah. So if you're doing the same things, it can still feel like it's just not what it used to be.
Because people are looking for that like the spark has died, the flame has died, the passion. And what the people are usually really talking about is that you're no longer getting your fucking heroin hit.
Right. But what is important to realize is that through actually being aware of that, knowing that there is a cycle to these things,
and you can grow it,
you can choose to re-engage and to refresh the connection and to actively choose to grow together, to learn new things together, to try new things together. And that little spark of novelty is literally sometimes all it takes to renew those chemical cycles.
It's that moment when like you're doing something with your partner and you look over at them and it's just that like that butterfly feeling all over again, and that like when you, it's almost like, you know when people say like, you know, like I fell in love with you all over again. It's one of those moments, and it's, I think that a lot of people, especially from like films, which I know we're both actors, like it's what we do all the time. We watch them, we love them. But it's always like those big grand gestures. It's the big romantic montage. It's the big reunion after a fight, and I think that in reality, it's about the really small moments and like deciding to come back and
recognizing where the strengths are in the relationship, what value you each add to it, and then leaning into those things.
And that's and I think just it should be normalized to be evaluating those things. Like if you and your partner have grown apart to a point where you don't see, when you look at your life, at your future, when they don't go the same way anymore, when they're not compatible, there's also no shame in just choosing to detach and move on. And it doesn't mean that you don't love that person anymore.
Absolutely.
Or that like what you had wasn't real, or that it was a failure. It just,
and I've known some relationships that have grown apart in that way, and have managed to stay eventually friendly with each other, even without the forced need to because of kids. Like sometimes it's just, oh no, we realized we really wanted something completely different in life.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to fight that and force it to work and making one or the other bitter about it, we just went, oh no, like we just don't want the same thing.
Yeah.
And rather than like letting that ruin us and letting that make us fucking miserable, let's just call it quits now rather than like torturing each other.
Yeah, I think that it's, I mean, like I have several exes that I'm still friends with. Like we may not be super duper close.
Yeah.
For some of them, but it's one of those things where I think, you know, after taking some initial time to kind of like step back and heal, if you really cared about that person for the right reasons, that care never goes away.
Yeah.
And so it's an adjustment of how you appear in their lives. Like you go from being romantic lead, love interest, to like maybe now you're the funny best friend.
Yeah. And like when we're saying like recognizing that you have different wants out of life, you know, it's not like, oh, you like pickles and I think they're fucking disgusting. Like, no, it's not that stupid.
That just means more pickles for you.
Exactly. But we're talking like, one of you wants to live on a boat and go around the world indefinitely and just live as a nomad, and the other one wants to have a house with the white picket fence and like 2.5 kids and like do the whole classic traditional
2.5
thing.
kids and a dog. Like, you know, nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with either of those life wants and goals and dreams. But trying to make someone who wants one of those things fit with someone who wants the other, that is a recipe for disaster.
I think it's the idea of compromise that comes up a lot. A lot of people are like, you know, you have to compromise in relationships, and that is true. To an extent, you can compromise on the small things, but the big things that are the core of who you are and the kind of life that you want to lead, those are non-negotiables. Those are either they line up or they don't.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, we kiss and we say good luck and goodbye, and
Yeah,
like I'll
it's
see you
like,
when I see you.
There doesn't even have to be bad water about it. It's just we want different things.
There can be sadness for sure.
Yeah, because of course there is. There's a certain grief that comes from that loss of the possibility, for sure.
But just because like you miss somebody or you're sad about it doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision.
Yeah.
That's something that has freed me so much from a lot of my breakups, is the fact that like, yes, you can still miss that person and miss the value that they brought into your life. But at the end of the day,
if it wasn't meant to be and if it wasn't a good match, then it just isn't.
Yeah, it's just like a little bird. Just gotta let it set it free. I don't know why I have to always go to cliches.
So, with all of that said, obviously I think ultimately the main theme of this episode is get better at having those conversations. The importance of learning that communication is really key. That comes up. Communication comes up.
Communication never stops.
It never stops. It's part of the initiation of a relationship. It's part of the navigation of compatibility in terms of the bedroom and sexuality. It's important in terms of normalizing exploring your own body and having like an understanding of like what you like and dislike through masturbation, things like that. And it's really, really important in like helping your partner get to know you and how to navigate that with a partner. Because, like, yes, of course, we would love for every partner we have to like be able to like read our mind perfectly, kiss us exactly the way we want to be kissed, touch us exactly the way we want to be touched. But the truth is, if you communicate and if you do it in an open and caring and unjudgmental way,
sometimes a little bit of humor gathers you along the way. That sentence made kind of sense.
You can make a lot of leeway and like a lot of ground can be covered in a great way, and you can actually start with good sex and end up with incredible sex. Mind-blowing sex.
Because I do feel like it gets better the longer that you go. Like, sometimes, like, the first time can be amazing.
Yeah, the, like, new chemical, like, releases and, like, the little fireworks that happen from that. Like, that's fun. But the deeper bond and release of chemicals that can happen over time with those further conversations and that deeper level of intimacy is profound.
Fun.
Yes. But it's all ultimately also a spectrum, and it's about figuring out your own body, learning what you need, what you want, and what you definitely don't want or need.
Yes. Your hard yeses, your maybes, and your hard no's.
And honoring what your body needs through the different phases of your natural hormonal cycles.
Because sometimes you'll be really horny, and sometimes you'll be like, don't touch me, just bring me chicken nuggets or dog.
Exactly. And all of those things are just part of the human experience, and it's part of living and living in a fulfilled and fully expressed way.
Yes.
So that, I think, is part 2. I think that's
part
all
2.
Of it. We will have
part 2, kind of.
Yeah.
Question mark.
There will be further delving into certain topics that came up naturally over the course of this.
Yes.
And
if there's anything that you guys want us to expand on more or focus on, let us know in the comments.
Absolutely.
Going forward, Chloe and I have discussed, because we've never done this before, we're kind of learning as well. We are learning as we go, not kind of, we are. We're going to get a little bit more laser focused with our episodes so that we need a playpen to play in. If you just let us out into the woods, like, we're going to go sign something.
So we need to have
parameters,
really specific topics that we're going to be going into in future episodes. The less specific ones are going to be more like our reaction videos that we still plan to do for like watching films together and reacting to them.
So we're going to have to do Lady Chinese Lover again, because that
absolutely
was delightful.
And all of that is definitely coming down the road. The next 2 weeks, it's going to mostly be little shorts that you're going to be seeing from us.
We're both seeing family and going to be traveling and out of town.
Yeah.
So we'll do little things on our own and then post them to both TikTok and Instagram Reels.
But then after that, we're getting right back into the swing of things. We've got a whole calendar of content planned for you guys and a whole shooting schedule so we can start getting it out to you weekly.
Yes.
Which we're really excited to start doing.
Because life's always going to be crazy, so it's just making boundaries with ourselves as well.
And obviously we'll do seasons, so like down the road, once we've got a series of episodes out, you know, we may take like a hiatus, take like a month off.
No,
and then, like,
we don't get breaks. This is a capitalist society. You're going to work until
or like, you know, take a couple weeks off for like the holidays or something like that. But
way to be reasonable.
We will be back consistently. So stay tuned to our social medias and to here on YouTube for all the little shorts that are going to be coming up and out, and exciting things ahead. Thank you for joining us, you guys.
Thanks, guys. We adore you. Yes.
Cheers.